You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. The Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, commonly known as RICO, is a powerful tool designed to dismantle organized crime. But what happens when this statute is misapplied? Today, we're discussing the RICO case of Robert Kelly, known to the world as R. Kelly. To argue that in fact the use of RICO in his prosecution was fundamentally flawed. The evidence suggests his actions were always individual in nature and not the work of an organized criminal enterprise. Let's break it down. To grasp why the RICO application in Kelly's case is problematic, we first need to understand what RICO is. Enacted in 1970, RICO was designed to target groups like the mafia, structured organizations engaging in a pattern of criminal activity for profit or power. The statute requires three key elements: an enterprise, a pattern of racketeering activity, and conduct that furthers the enterprise's criminal objectives. An illegal enterprise isn't just a group of people, it's a structured entity with a common criminal purpose, hierarchy, and continuity. Racketeering activity includes specific crimes like bribery, extortion, or trafficking committed at least twice over a period of time. Without these elements, RICO doesn't apply. In Kelly's case, the prosecution argued that his inner circle constituted a criminal enterprise. But does that hold up under scrutiny? Let's examine the facts. The government's case claimed that Kelly ran a criminal enterprise involving his managers, assistants, and other associates to facilitate illegal activities, primarily related to allegations of sexual misconduct and trafficking. They alleged this enterprise operated over decades, with Kelly as the ringleader orchestrating a system to recruit, groom, and exploit victims. The prosecution pointed to his music career, tours, and personal staff as the infrastructure of this supposed enterprise. They cited communications, payments, and travel arrangements as evidence of a coordinated effort. On the surface, this narrative seems compelling. After all, Kelly's wealth and fame gave him access to resources and people. But when we peel back the layers, the RICO framework starts to crumble. The question here isn't whether Kelly committed wrongs, it's whether those wrongs meet the legal threshold for an organized criminal enterprise under RICO. The cornerstone of RICO is the existence of an illegal enterprise, which is a distinct structured organization with a shared criminal purpose. In Kelly's case, the prosecution failed to prove this. First, let's consider the so-called enterprise. Kelly's team consisted of typical music industry professionals, managers, security plus assistants whose primary roles were to support his career and not to engage in criminal activity. These individuals were hired to handle logistics like booking tours, managing schedules, or ensuring his safety, but not to form a criminal syndicate as alleged. There's no evidence of a formal hierarchy dedicated to illegal acts, no documented chain of command like you'd see in a mob case where roles are clearly defined for criminal purposes. Instead, the prosecution relied on loose associations, claiming that anyone who worked for Kelly was part of this alleged illegal enterprise. Now that's a stretch. Moreover, the alleged acts, while serious, were episodic and personal in nature. The accusations center on Kelly's relationships and interactions with individuals, often in private settings, which is typical of private and personal relationships as opposed to racketeering. These incidents, even if they were true, lack the coordinated systemic structure required for RICO. For example, in true RICO cases like those against drug cartels, you see clear patterns of profit-driven crimes, drug trafficking, money laundering, and extortion carried out through a network of people with a shared goal. In Kelly's case, the allegations are deeply personal and tied to his purported behavior and choices, and not a collective scheme for profit or power. The prosecution's attempt to frame his lifestyle as an enterprise conflates fame and influence with organized crime. Now that's a dangerous precedent. RICO also requires a pattern of racketeering activity, which implies specific predicate crimes committed multiple times to show continuity. The prosecution pointed to acts like alleged kidnapping, forced labor, and trafficking as predicate offenses. But these claims don't align cleanly with RICO's requirements. For instance, trafficking under RICO typically involves commercial exploitation like prostitution rings with clear financial motives. The allegations against Kelly, while may sound troubling, revolve around personal relationships, not a business model of exploitation. There's no evidence of a profit-driven scheme where Kelly and his team systematically profited from illegal acts in the way a cartel or mob does. Additionally, the timeline of alleged acts spans decades, which the prosecution used to argue continuity. But RICO demands more than just repeated behavior. It requires a pattern tied to the enterprise's goals. Many of the incidents cited were isolated, involving different individuals at different times without a clear thread linking them to a singular criminal purpose. The prosecution's broad brush painting every interaction as part of a grand conspiracy is simply an overreach. And it's worth noting that Kelly's high-profile status made him a target for scrutiny, and the government's case leaned heavily on emotional narratives rather than concrete evidence of a structured enterprise. Applying RICO to Kelly's case stretches the statute beyond its intended purpose. RICO was meant for groups like the Gambino crime family, not individuals whose personal misconduct, however egregious, lacks the organizational backbone of a criminal enterprise. This misapplication risks weaponizing RICO against anyone with influence or a team, celebrities, executives, and even politicians. If a loose network of employees and personal choices can be labeled an enterprise, then RICO could be used to target almost anyone with resources, blurring the line between individual wrongdoing and organized crime. RICO simply isn't the right tool for Kelly's case. Other statutes, like those addressing sexual misconduct or coercion, are better suited to address individual actions without distorting the legal framework. By forcing RICO onto this case, the prosecution diluted its power for future cases where true organized crime like drug cartels or terrorist networks are at play. Now let's talk evidence. The prosecution's case leaned heavily on testimony from alleged victims and former employees, but much of it was anecdotal and lacking corroboration of a structured enterprise. Emails, texts, and financial records were presented, but they showed routine business operations, travel bookings, NDAs, payments to staff, but not a criminal conspiracy. In contrast, RICO cases typically involve wiretaps, ledgers, or explicit communications outlining criminal plans. None of that exists here. The government's reliance on emotional testimony, while powerful, doesn't meet the legal threshold for RICO. Fairness matters too. Kelly's fame amplified the case, creating a public narrative that made an impartial trial challenging. The media painted him as a villain long before the gavel fell, and the RICO charge, a term associated with mob bosses, added fuel to that fire. This argument is about ensuring the law is applied correctly. Every individual deserves a proper defense that challenges overreach, and in this case, RICO was a square peg forced into a round hole. The application of RICO in R. Kelly's case was a total misstep. His actions should never have attracted such charges designed for organized crime syndicates. The lack of a clear enterprise, the absence of a profit-driven pattern, and the reliance on emotional rather than structural evidence undermine the RICO charge. This case in fact sets a troubling precedent, one that could erode the boundaries of RICO and threaten fairness in the justice system. It's in fact time to rethink how we apply powerful laws like RICO, ensuring they target true criminal enterprises and not individual misconduct. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.